There is a silence which is not the absence of sound, but the cessation of a certain kind of hearing. It is the moment the seashell, held lifelong to the ear, is suddenly lowered, and what is revealed is not the quiet of an empty beach, but the terrifying, deafening roar of one's own blood. Picture, if you will, a tree in a forest that has for decades felt not only the storm against its own branches, but also the beetle's anguish in the oak, the root's thirst in the maple, the weight of every sparrow's nest in every neighboring pine. It feels the forest's sorrow as its own sap. And then there comes a morning, cold and clear, when it no longer does. This is the instant, not a decision but an unfolding. A psychic membrane, worn translucent by the constant osmosis of souls, finally seals itself. The empath detaches. And what floods in is not peace, but a vacuum more horrifying than any shared pain. For the emotions of the world were a terrible tide, but they were also a proof of connection, a dark confirmation of being alive within the great, suffering body of humanity. Now, there is a stillness, a cosmic quiet, and in that quiet, one meets the face of one's own long-ignored solitude, not as a concept, but as a chilling, immense fact. The inner world, which had poured itself endlessly outward to mend the fractures in others, collapses back upon its own architecture. And the first sound heard in this new, terrible silence is the echo of a single question: if I am no longer the vessel for the world's feeling, then who, in God's name, am I? There is a sound, a constant, whispering roar, that you have confused for your own breath. It is the sigh of the crowded street, the tremor of a friend's unvoiced anxiety across the dinner table, the submerged grief of a stranger held just beneath the skin of their polite smile. You have listened to it all, not with your ears, but with the very fabric of your being. You have been a silent auditor to the world's hidden heart, and you called this hearing compassion. You called it connection. But I must ask you, what becomes of the auditor when the chamber of echoes grows so loud that the note of his own soul is utterly drowned? This is not merely fatigue. It is a crisis of orientation. You have navigated by the stars of others' needs, their moods your only constellation, until the inner compass, the quiet, true needle pointing to your own north, has been forgotten beneath the rust of constant use. The instant of detachment, then, is not a betrayal of your nature, but a profound and terrifying act of self-preservation. It is the closing of the outer gate so that the inner sanctum may be remembered. The silence that descends is not empty. It is dense. It is the sudden, shocking presence of a room you have always lived in, but never occupied. This newfound silence is at first a deafening void. The absence of that constant psychic noise feels like a kind of death, because a part of you, the part that defined itself through this endless resonance, has indeed ceased to be. You may wander this inner hall, feeling its vastness as abandonment. You will be tempted to mistake this quiet for emptiness, this solitude for isolation. But listen now with a different faculty. Listen not for, but to. In the absence of the orchestra of others, a single, fragile instrument begins to tune itself. It is a sound long forgotten, the timbre of your own being. This is the sanctuary of silence. It is not a retreat from the world, but a descent into the citadel of the self. Here, in this hallowed quiet, you are not receiving, you are receiving yourself. The emotions that arise are not foreign vibrations, but your own ancient waters, long stilled by the storms you absorbed from every passing ship. This is where you hear, perhaps for the first time in years, your own anger, which you had mislabeled as another's provocation. your own sorrow, which you had worn as a garment for everyone else's mourning, your own joy, pure and uncrafted, which had no space to resonate before. This inward listening is the most radical act of reclamation. It is not an end to empathy, but its necessary purification. To forever resonate with every note is to become noise. To hold the silence within is to become a vessel that can once again choose what to hold. From this sanctuary, you may again step into the world's cacophony, not as a hollow reed through which every wind howls, but as a distinct and sovereign instrument. You will hear the pain of the other, not as a command to drown, but as a signal across a respectful distance, a distance that makes true connection, and not mere fusion, finally possible. The sanctuary is built not of stone, but of conscious breath. Its threshold is crossed not by a step, but by a decision to hear the one voice you were born to understand. And so you stand within your silence, hearing at last the authentic rhythm of your own soul. But this is only the beginning. For what is a sanctuary without walls? It remains vulnerable to every old echo, every familiar storm that would seek entry. The silence you have cultivated is precious, and like all precious things, it requires a vessel to hold it. This is where the great work begins, not merely listening, but forging. You must now take the very substance of your old suffering, the leaden weight of absorbed pain you carried for so long, and subject it to the inner fire. This is the alchemy of boundaries, the transformation of what was once a wound into what will become your protection. Consider this, that pain you absorbed was not meaningless. It was data. It was the raw, unrefined ore of experience, telling you where the world ends and you begin. Every ache of another's sorrow you made your own was, in its tragic way, a mapping of a frontier. You felt the location of the breach intensely because you had no border there. Now, you are called to become a cartographer of the self, drawing the line not in sand, but in the smelted metal of conscious understanding. This is not the construction of a fortress to imprison you, nor a wall built from coldness. That would be a betrayal of your nature. True armor is not a cage, it is a shaping. It allows movement, it permits choice, it defends the heart, so the heart may remain open on its own terms. Think of the alchemist's crucible. The base metal does not vanish, it is subjected to transformative heat until its essential, higher nature is revealed. Your compassion, your boundless feeling, is that essential nature. Your accumulated pain is the base metal. The heat is your own conscious, willing engagement with this material, your refusal to let it define you as victim, and your decision to let it inform you as sovereign. To forge a boundary from this material is a sacred act. It says, this experience of your anguish will not cripple me, it will teach me. This memory of your demand will not own me, it will clarify my capacity to give. You are not building from nothing. You are recasting the very substance of your past endurance into a discernment that is both gentle and immutable. It is a boundary that breathes, that has a gate you alone command. It can be permeable to empathy, yet solid against invasion, receptive to need, yet impervious to coercion. This sacred armor feels, at first, unfamiliar. Its weight may seem heavy, for you are accustomed to the exhausting, familiar weight of carrying others. But this weight is distributed. It is borne with purpose. It is the weight of responsibility for the self, rather than the crushing burden of responsibility for others. Wearing it, you will find you can walk closer to the fire of human suffering without burning, and stand in the gale of another's emotion without being uprooted. You are no longer just the silent auditor, nor merely the inhabitant of a quiet sanctuary. You are now also the artisan of your own presence, working in the smithy of the soul, hammering the raw echoes of the past into a form that honors both your depth and your right to be. The gate of your sanctuary now has a guardian, forged in your own inner fire, and now armored in a silence that breathes and a boundary that serves. You face the most insidious ghost of all, the one you have housed within your own mind. For you have carried not only the pain of others, but their questions, their potentials, their unmade choices. You have played the oracle, not by choice, but by a cruel, automatic compulsion. You have known which path would wound them, which word would unravel them, which silent hope flickered behind their eyes. This knowing was your service, and it became your cage. The tyranny of this constant, unbidden foresight is a weight that bends the spine of the soul. For to always see the unseen in others is to never fully see the reality of oneself. Consider the true oracle of antiquity. She did not speak in casual conversation. She descended into a sacred, fumigated chamber, a space set apart, and her pronouncements were met with terror and awe. But you have performed this sacred, draining ritual in the marketplace, in the drawing room, in the passing glance. You have inhaled the fumes of every unspoken tension. You have descended into the trance of every hidden motive, and you have offered your visions without payment, without ceremony, and most crucially, without permission from your own life. Your psyche has been a public temple, its altar cluttered with the petitions of every passing stranger. This exhaustion you feel is not of the body, but of the prophetic faculty itself. It is the burnout of the inner eye, strained from reading too many texts in too dim a light. You are weary not from feeling, but from foreseeing, from the constant, grinding work of translating the unconscious murmurs of the world into a language you alone seem to understand. And what has this oracle's duty cost you? It has cost you the simple, holy right to surprise, to be ignorant, to stand before another person not as a seer scanning their depths, but as a fellow human, meeting them on the solid, sunlit ground of the present moment. To reclaim the self from this tyranny is an act of profound humility. It is to step down from the tripod, to let the sacred vapors dissipate, and to feel the cool, common air of your own humanity. It is to willingly blind that inner eye to the looming shadows of others' futures, so that your own present may come into focus. This is not a denial of your gift, but a maturation of it. A true seer must know when not to see, lest the vision consume the vessel. You must learn to misread the signs on purpose, to ignore the whisper that says, "He will fail," or "She is lying." You must grant others the sacred dignity of their own unfolding, their own mistakes, their own revelations which are not yours to have. In this deliberate retreat from knowing, you create a space for genuine meeting. You are no longer the distant, weary prophet on the hill, but the traveler on the road, surprised by the same weather, curious about the same turning in the path. The oracle exhausted is not the end of wisdom, but the beginning of wonder. For when you cease the constant, draining labor of divining the souls of others, you finally leave room for your own soul to speak its mysteries, which you have been too busy to hear. And in this quiet, common space, you may at last encounter your own unanswered questions. And so, having deposed the inner oracle and embraced the liberty of your own not knowing, a fundamental question of form now emerges. What shall you become in this new relation to the world? For you can no longer return to that old, porous state of being a mere sponge, passively absorbing the ambient emotional weather until saturated, heavy, and dripping with waters not your own. That was not a function of spirit, but of osmosis. The sponge is a passive object, defined entirely by what it soaks up, and its only release is to be squeezed by external hands. This is not a fate for a soul. You are called now to choose your own architecture, to decide the very geometry of your presence. Will you become a mirror, a sword, a fortress? Consider the mirror first. It is a surface of conscious reflection. It does not absorb the image that falls upon it. It receives it, presents it clearly, and lets it go. To become a mirror is to offer others the startling grace of seeing themselves truly, perhaps for the first time, without your own emotions clouding the glass. It is to say, "This is what I see. This is the shape of your joy, the contour of your pain. It is yours to behold." The mirror does not weep the tears of the one who gazes into it. It holds the space for their own recognition. This is empathy without enmeshment, a clear, cool boundary of light. Then, the sword. This is the principle of discernment, sharpened in the fires of your own reclaimed will. It is not a weapon for wounding, but a tool for severing, cutting the psychic cords that bind you to compulsions, to rescue fantasies, to the ancient hooks of another's unhealed demand. The sword is the active expression of your no, a clean line that liberates both you and the other from the sticky confusion of misplaced responsibility. It is the clarity that knows where you end and where the battlefield of another's soul begins, and chooses not to fight their wars with your own spirit. And finally, the fortress. Not a prison of isolation, but a citadel of chosen hospitality. Its walls are the boundaries you have alchemized, its high towers grant perspective, and its gate operates on the principle of your sovereign consent. From within, you are safe to be vulnerable, for you decide what enters. You can open the gate to compassion, to deep conversation, to genuine need, because you know you can also close it. The fortress protects the sanctuary within. It makes your silence and your newfound peace sustainable. No longer a sponge, you are now an active participant in your own dynamics. You choose the form appropriate to the moment, the reflective mirror, the discerning sword, the resilient fortress. This is the movement from being a receptacle of the world's psyche to becoming a shaper of your own relational reality. You are no longer defined by what you take in, but by what you consciously, and with great intention, project and protect. Thus, your very presence becomes an act of artistry, a deliberate expression of soul force in a world that once simply washed through you. And now, having chosen your form, be it mirror, sword, or fortress, a deeper, more subtle work awaits. For architecture alone is not life. A fortress may stand silent, a sword may rest in its scabbard, a mirror may gaze upon an empty room. The question of vibration remains. You have cleared the static of others, yes. You have built walls against the cacophony. But within this newfound silence, what is the fundamental tone of your own being? This is the essential task, to move from the geometry of defense to the music of existence. You must undertake the cosmic disconnect, not as a rejection of the whole, but as the necessary prelude to finding your own unique frequency within the great, humming orchestra of being. Imagine, if you will, that you have lived for an age tuned precisely to the dominant chord of those around you, the frantic tempo of their anxieties, the minor key of their sorrows, the fluctuating pitch of their needs. Your entire psychic instrument was dedicated to this harmonic absorption, this constant, precise resonance. To detach is to experience a moment of terrifying nullity, as if the very laws of acoustic physics have been repealed. But in that nullity, a miracle occurs. A faint, almost forgotten hum begins to announce itself from within your core. It is not the borrowed sound of another. It is your own fundamental note, the tone your soul was set to at its origin. Finding this frequency is not an intellectual exercise. It is a slow, patient tuning in the dark. You must listen past the memory of the old static, past the guilt of this disconnect, which feels, at first, like a betrayal of the cosmic contract you believed you had signed. This is the illusion. The true contract is not to mimic the world's noise, but to contribute your own authentic sound to it. A symphony requires violins, cellos, flutes, each distinct, each playing its own part. It does not require every instrument to become a blur of echoing the others. That is not harmony. It is a monotonous, soul-deadening drone. Your own frequency may feel strange to you, quieter, perhaps, or slower, or of a timbre less dramatic than the storms you were accustomed to conducting. It may feel simple, even small. Do not mistake its subtlety for insignificance. This is the sound of your essence. It is the vibration that aligns you with your own purpose, your own vitality, your own uncrafted joys and sorrows. When you resonate from this core, your actions cease to be reactions. Your words cease to be echoes. Your life ceases to be a commentary on the lives of others and becomes a primary text, written in the language of your own authentic being. This is the cosmic reconnect on a higher level. You are not a disconnected fragment floating in the void. You are a conscious node, broadcasting a clear and steady signal on a bandwidth that is uniquely yours. And from this place of tuned clarity, you will discover a new kind of connection, not the fusion of shared noise, but the resonant recognition that occurs when another, who has also found their own frequency, sends their signal across the space between. That space is no longer empty static. It is the sacred ground of true encounter. The universe does not ask for your echo, it awaits your original voice. And so, having found that essential tone, your own frequency, humming in the quiet of your being, you confront the most profound and natural consequence of this inner tuning. It is the crystallization of self from solution. For decades, perhaps, you existed as a conscious salt dissolved in the vast, swirling ocean of the human condition. You felt every current, every storm, every change in pressure as your own. There was no separation between the droplet and the sea. You were the sea, in its collective anguish and its collective joy. This was the state of fusion, the primal we. And from it, you drew a sense of immense, if painful, belonging. But to be dissolved is to have no shape of your own. Now, in the sanctuary of your silence, guarded by your forged boundaries, and resonating with your own note, a precipitate of self begins to form. This is the birth of the I from the sea of we. It is not a betrayal of connection, but the necessary evolution of consciousness. Consider the moment a single, perfect crystal forms in a saturated solution. It is not an attack upon the fluid, it is a revelation of a latent structure, a coming into form of a specific, unique pattern that was always implied, but never distinct. Your individuality is that crystal, the pain you absorbed, the joys you reflected, the constant static of the we. This was the saturated solution. Your conscious choice to turn inward, to listen, to forge, and to tune, has provided the point of perturbation, the slight change in temperature where the I can no longer remain formless. It begins to coalesce around the nucleus of your own soul. This birth is a lonely sacrament. It feels, at first, like an exile. You look upon the ocean from which you have crystallized and feel a terrifying solitude. The oceanic feeling of being everything is receding, replaced by the sharp, defined edges of being something, someone. This is the grief of the newborn I. It mourns the lost paradise of undifferentiated union, even as it steps into the dignity of its own form. Do not confuse this grief for a mistake. It is the proof of the transformation. For this E that is born is not the small, selfish ego of childish demand. That is a phantom. The I born from this conscious travail is the individual, the indivisible unit of wholeness Jung spoke of. It is capable of standing in relation to the we, without being consumed by it. It can look upon the ocean and say, I am of you, but I am not you. I reflect your light in my own facets, but I have my own geometry. From this position of distinct form, true relationship becomes possible for the first time. Fusion is not relationship, it is a confusion of boundaries, a dream of oneness where no dialogue is needed. But the crystal can interface with the fluid. It can be immersed without dissolving. It can filter, reflect, and transform what flows around it, because it has a stable structure. You can now love the ocean without being the ocean. You can empathize with the wave without having to become its crash upon the shore. You are no longer a dissolved essence, but a being of defined, luminous structure, a unique and irreplaceable pattern, precipitated from the whole dot. And so you stand, a crystal of distinct and conscious form, gazing from the quietude of your own being at the vast, humming world from which you precipitated. The solitude is real, the silence is palpable, and here arises the final, most human question. Having forged this sovereign self, having claimed this sacred detachment, are you now condemned to the observer's tower, forever separate, a monument to your own hard-won integrity? I tell you no. This is the great paradox, the completion of the circle. What you have called detachment was not the end point, but the necessary preparation. It is the grounding of the lightning rod, so that it may safely conduct the celestial fire. This is the gift reclaimed. Where once you had only fusion, you may now have fellowship. Where once you were drowned by the wave, you may now choose to swim with the current. Your detachment is the prelude to true, chosen connection. For what is a connection that costs the self? It is not connection at all. It is a sacrifice, a vanishing. It is the spark extinguishing itself in the flood. The love, the empathy, the profound compassion you possess, these were never the enemy. The enemy was the absence of the vessel to hold them. You poured your wine into broken cups and wondered why you were left with only emptiness and stain. Now, you have fashioned a chalice of your own substance. It is strong, it is defined, it is yours, and because it is yours, you may now choose what to pour into it, and with whom to share its contents. This is the transformation of the gift from a curse into a craft. Your sensitivity, once a wound forever open to the world's sharp winds, has now been enclosed within the sanctuary of your being. It has become a sacred chamber from which you may open windows at will. You can look upon another's pain and feel the resonant echo within your own chamber without the walls collapsing. You can hear their frequency and choose to harmonize with it, rather than being overwhelmed by its amplitude. This is empathy as a conscious art, not a reflex of possession. Imagine the crystal, now fully formed, taking its place among other crystals in a mosaic. It does not dissolve back into the mortar. It touches its neighbors along precise facets, at chosen angles, contributing its unique color and structure to a greater pattern. This is the new we not a oceanic dissolution, but a constellation of distinct eyes, each shining its own light, each respecting the boundaries of the other's form. From this place, your relationships are no longer dramas of desperate rescue or silent consumption, but dialogues between sovereign beings. You can connect from abundance, not depletion, from choice, not compulsion. The gift, once a leash, has become a bridge. You can walk across it to meet another, knowing you can always return to the solid ground of yourself. Thus, the circle closes, not where it began, but on a higher plane of being. The empath, once lost in the sea, has become the architect of conscious shorelines, building from the reclaimed substance of the solar world, where feeling and form are one. And so, we arrive at the threshold. You came here bearing the quiet ache of the endless echo, the fatigue of the oracle, the weight of waters not your own. You leave not with a lighter burden, but with a stronger spine. You leave not having silenced the world, but having discovered your own voice within the symphony. You are no longer a whisper lost in the storm. You are the calm, clear note that shapes the wind. Look at what you have already done. You have turned silence into a sanctuary. You have alchemized pain into protection. You have dethroned the tyrant of knowing to reclaim the throne of your own being. You have ceased to be a sponge and chosen instead to be a mirror, a sword, a fortress, a conscious architect of your own reality. You have tuned out the static of the world to find your own essential frequency. You have crystallized a sovereign I from the formless sea of we. And in doing so, you have not abandoned your gift, but forged it into a tool of conscious, chosen connection. This is your power. This is your unstoppable truth. The world will continue its noise. The waves of anguish and demand will still break upon the shore. But you are no longer sand, worn away by every tide. You are the cliff, and within you are the deep, quiet caves that give the ocean its echo, and the high, unshakable promontory that chooses which storms to greet. So go now. Carry this forged self into the world. Do not ask for permission to occupy your own space. Do not apologize for the strength of your boundaries, for they are the guardians of your compassion. Listen from your sanctuary, act from your forge, connect from your crystal self. Let your empathy be a conscious act of courage, not a reflex of exhaustion. You are the architect of your inner world, and from that sovereignty, you will rebuild your outer world. You are no longer a victim of resonance. You are the source. Go forth and resonate on purpose. Thank you, and good luck on this, the greatest of adventures, the life that is authentically, powerfully, and unstoppably your own.